Hi everyone. Steve Jobs announcing that he was going to step down as Chief Executive Officer of Apple is not just a blow for Apple, but for the San Francisco Bay Area. Here's why, and I don't mean from an economic standpoint. We have lost that creative business executive who was more than just the operator of a company. He was the creator of a lifestyle and the mover of culture. We have never seen a person like Steve Jobs. We've seen designers and technologists. We've seen futurists. We have never seen a person that was all those in one package. And the reason why Steve Jobs and Apple are both hero and popular product for geek culture is because Steve grew up in our time, in the Zinni 62 era, where Star Trek was the popular show and science fiction was emerging as a popular genre to follow. So much so that we began to look at technology and say, what if it were designed a certain way? But Steve went a giant step further and he said, I'm going to make that our reality. So at the time IBM introduced the personal computer, which though effective and efficient was ugly and clunky, Steve Jobs turned around and made the Macintosh, which looked like a little bitty computer that you might see on the Jetsons. Keep that in mind. And then when he came back to Apple in 1997, he created something called the iMac, which looked exactly like the type of television / computer you would see on what? The Jetsons. So Steve got what moved us. He read the culture around him and with barely a thought insisted on making products he called insanely great. But he didn't just mean insanely great from a technical standpoint. He meant insanely great from a lifestyle standpoint. Steve Jobs was the first person to take the Bay Area idea, the San Francisco Bay Area idea of how the world should work, embody it in a product, and put it out to the world and say, this is what you should have. And the world said, you're right. That's powerful. And it's a style that other Silicon Valley technology companies and social media companies should really emulate. But the bottom line is you can't, because you can't just grow a Steve Jobs on a tree. You can't just say, hey, look, I'm going to genetically engineer myself a Steve Jobs and there I am. There will only be one Steve Jobs in my lifetime and yours. Only one. That's it. But that doesn't mean that there can't be other kinds of people that have their ideas and ways about thinking about the world and allow that to be imprinted on a company like Yahoo and watch that company grow and advance. Yahoo hasn't had that kind of leader. It has had bureaucrats as leaders. To give you one example of a company that could learn from how Apple grew under a Steve Jobs, in this case, the Steve Jobs. That can point out countless other examples. So the bottom line is that Tim Cook and Apple, for the next generation, are going to have to figure out if they want to embody Steve Jobs and be that person, or take off in a whole other area, a whole new place. I know I've said that there will only be one Steve Jobs, but for a person who's had that much power, that much impact, what's wrong with his company saying, you know what, we're going to embody his idea and his spirit and march forward? I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and that's what Apple should do. Little story before I close. I remember I saw Steve during his time where he was wearing all black. This was like in 1984. And he was at Cafe Roma, we now call Cafe Strada, at the corner of Bancroft and College. And I, being me, went up and I said, hey, aren't you Steve Jobs? He said, yeah, that's what they tell me. Very matter of fact. Cool guy. I hope that we get another 15 years of life with Steve Jobs. I hope that he's able to beat this thing called pancreatic cancer And I hope that he's able to beat it soon. We're all with you, Steve. Fight on.